quite often in web design, you're going to have pages where you've got all the content on the page scattered throughout, but all contained within a single fixed width container that spans mostly the full height of the page. Maybe usually the nav or the header and the footer might span outside of that, but the majority of the body content might be inside that fixed width container. But what happens when you want to take something from within that container, a single element, and you want to stretch it out and span it, so it's the full width of the page and not just the width of that single container? There's a couple of different ways to do this, so we're going to explore them. We're going to look at a naive approach first and see the kind of problems that come with that. And then we're going to take a look at how to do it in some way that's a little bit more reusable and friendly. Let's say we wanted to take maybe this subheading, this paragraph, and this block quote, and we want to change the background color of that. Not just the background color of it itself, but we wanted to change the background color across the entire width of the page, kind of to push it out into its own panel and make it look a lot more distinct. How might we achieve that? Well, the first attempt, which I think is maybe a bit naive, is we'll find the start of the subheading here, and we'll look at the elements that are wrapping it until we get all the way up to the one that is setting the max width. So just before this, we can maybe end that section. We'll end the article that's there as well, and we can end that div. And now we can see the page is breaking out to the full width at that point. So we wanted this stuff after the block quote to still be in there. So let's go and add back that stuff. We'll create a new div with the container, a new article, and then we will also set up the new section. And at first, that might look like it is doing basically what we want. We can now come in here, we can add a div with a background of, let's say, BG Gray 950, and take text white. We can come down and close that as well. And that works pretty well. Now, we can add some additional styling here. So let's say we wanted the text to line up with what it was before. We might come back and add in another div that sets the class of MX Auto, max width 2XL, and padding of 6. And now all of the text outside that container are going to line up with the text inside there, but we've got a different background color. Pretty much what we wanted. Now, visually this worked, but there's a couple of things that I think make this a bit of a naive approach. Number one is the semantics. We started off initially with a single semantic article element that represents the entire article on the page, but now we've split it up into two. And even worse than that, because we were just thinking about styling, this text is not even inside an article at all. But realistically, we don't want it to be in multiple articles anyway. We don't want to just wrap this in another article tag, because any screen reader or any other tools that are using these semantic elements like article tags are going to be expecting a single one. You're going to be confusing users that are using screen readers if they're coming in and seeing 3 different articles and they go to the second one and it just starts on a random subheading or a random paragraph. We want to keep that semantically correct. And sometimes it's really easy to do that. We could maybe strip out that article there and make the entire wrapping div or wrap another element around it that is the article element. But sometimes you just don't have control over the markup like that. Depending on your component layout or anything, it can be a little bit difficult. So how can we go back and look at this in a way where we don't have to break out of the markup that we already had, but we can just insert something in there that will achieve the same thing? Let's revert to what we had before. Where now we have everything back inside that one main container. And let's have a look at how we can do this. So obviously what we wanted to do was wrap this entire element in something that would set the background color. Let's just go and add a little bit of padding as well, just to make sure that the text never runs all the way up against the background. Obviously, this element, the one that's setting the background and containing these other parts of the article, they live within this container that is setting the max width. So how do we take this left edge and take it all the way to the left of the screen, take the right edge and take it all the way to the right of the screen? We're going to start off by, I'm going to move this onto a separate line initially, just to make it a little bit clearer what we're doing. So this first line is just the stylistic elements we're doing. The second line here, I'm going to start to set width screen, which is 100% of the viewport width. And you'll see that this will keep the left edge. However, the right edge will be going all the way off to the right, and we will give a scroll bar. But if we go to the right-hand side, you'll see that this is now essentially full width. It's not quite styled how we want because it's obviously creating a scroll and it's not sorted at the left-hand side like we want. What we can do next is we can make this element relative, which lets us apply some other styling there. For example, what if we now set the left to 50% of the container's width, which is of course going to be 50% of the viewport width, and then we also set the margin on the left to an arbitrary value of minus 50% of the viewport width. Well, now that's come all the way across and done that. And in case anything at the right-hand side is off as well, we can do the same again. Well, we can set right to 50% and margin right to 50% of the viewport width. And that looks like it's worked pretty much perfectly. It's taking up the entire width of the page, the vertical height of the elements are still there correctly, and it's not adding any extra horizontal scroll for us. Perfect. But what happens if we come in and we maybe resize this a little bit to the point where there is a vertical scroll? I'll make it quite a lot smaller. You'll see that the content is now spanning off the bottom of the viewport, and that's added a vertical scroll bar. However, it's also added a horizontal scroll bar here. How do we get rid of that? That's maybe just a little bit more complex. So let's take a look at how we can deal with this. In this case, I know that the scroll bar width that I have here is 12 pixels wide. So basically all I want to do is remove 12 pixels from that. Because we know this is 12 pixels wide, what we're going to do is change this from width screen to width 100 VW, which is the same as screen. But instead of just taking that raw value as it is, we're going to come in and calculate it, and we're going to minus 12 pixels from it. And you see if we do this, 12 pixels actually leaves a little gap here at the right-hand side, which we don't really want. I could come back and change that to 6 pixels, and that would look correct. But that's a little bit misleading and not exactly what we want, and I'm going to show what we can do to solve that properly. And what we really want to do is we want to set the left and the right margin to each come in by half of that 12 pixel value for the scroll bar width. So if we look at the margin left here, what we can do is, instead of just setting 50 viewport width, we're going to calculate 50 viewport width plus half of that 12 pixel scroll bar width, so 6. Instead of having the entire thing negative, what we actually want is just that viewport width to be negative and then plus the 6 pixels. And you see that's already looking a little bit closer. And if we apply the same treatment to the margin right as well, this is now going to be looking and behaving exactly like we want basically everywhere. But we're not done just yet. We still got one problem to solve. This 12 pixel value is a bit arbitrary. It's a magic number, and I just happen to know that the scroll bar on my browser here is 12 pixels wide, but on any other browser or on anyone else's machines, it might not be 12 pixels wide. So I don't really want to hard code this. And even if I did hard code it, if I resize this so that I don't have any vertical scroll, you'll notice that I actually have 6 pixels of padding on either side of this full width container, which is not what I wanted here. So how can we figure out dynamically what the viewport width actually is and what the scroll bar width is, and how can we calculate those together? It gets a little bit messy. What I'm going to do for now is I'm going to come up here and I'm going to set a scroll bar width value. And for now, let's just set this to 0 pixels because here we have no scroll bar width. What I can do instead of having all of these places is I can come in and use var scrollbar width. Here, I can use var scrollbar width divided by 2. Actually, I want to wrap that in a calc as well, because we wanted to calculate half of that width. And the same one here, we want to calculate half of var scrollbar width. And now we have basically exactly the same thing. Here, it's going to work like that. If I go to a smaller screen, we have the horizontal scroll. But if I set that scroll bar width to 12 pixels, it will go away. So now we've got this dynamic code that will work pretty much as we want. All we need to do is figure out how do we get this scroll bar width value to be set properly. Obviously, we can't just hard code that in our markup. What we can do, though, is use a little bit of JavaScript. So here I've got an example where we've got a set scroll bar width property callback. What that's going to do is on the document element, it's going to set a property style of scroll bar width, and the value of that is going to be the Windows inner width minus the document body's client width. Now, the window inner width is essentially the width of the entire viewport, including the scroll bar, but the document body client width is going to be the width of the viewport without the scroll bar. So by taking the larger of those and subtracting the other one, what we're left with is a value which is, in the number of pixels, how wide the scroll bar is. So we can take that callback, and then on both load and on window resize, we can update that property. Then when we've got this JavaScript code running, we don't need to rely on manually setting the style in our markup. It will just automatically be set for us. And when we resize or when we have a different size browser, it's going to be either 0 or 12 pixels in this case, or whatever the value is for someone else's browser. And that way, it's going to resolve perfectly for us on any browser, on any screen size, and it's always going to look just right.